Well, hey there, it's time for the June 2026 Cape Coral Real Estate Market Update video. I do one of these every single month, as you may well know. We're really going to dive deep into the statistics and the facts of the figures of the Cape Coral real estate market, specifically focusing on the numbers that just came in from last month. So we're going to be talking about May 2026's number. I'm going to cover the entire market to start off with, and then we're really going to drill down and dive into some different categories of this Cape Coral real estate market. We'll look at some off-water single-family homes. We'll see what they're doing. Of course, we're going to look at the Gulf access single-family home market in Cape Coral. That's been on fire so far this year. I can't wait to share that with you. Then we're also going to take a look at condos and townhomes and see what they're doing, as well as vacant residential lots. And then I'm going to wrap up this entire video, as I always do, with some advice, specifically if you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice if you're a current seller in the Cape Coral real estate market. Make sure you stick around for that. There are chapters down there in the timeline. These are usually a little bit longer videos, so if you'd like to jump around to the various segments, feel free to do so. Those chapters are down in the timeline. But if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a 20-year full-time real estate broker right here in Cape Coral in Southwest Florida. Live here in Cape Coral with my wife and our 3 little kids up in the Northwest Cape, and I do a video like this every single month on the Cape Coral real estate market. But these are in addition to the weekly videos I put out, where we're really just talking about some useful topics. Sometimes we're looking at fun real estate, other times we're covering some useful topics for the folks that are interested in this area. So like last week we were talking about the governor's proposal for property tax relief here in Florida. So if you are interested in the area, you're moving to Fort Myers, moving to Cape Coral, moving to Punta Gorda, anywhere down here, or even if you just live here now and you want to keep up to speed on everything, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you turn the notifications on so you can be around for these videos every single week. I always love hearing from the folks that watch this channel. So if you do have a real estate need, feel free to call, text, email me anytime. Contact information's right there on the screen. But with that out of the way, and as the rain begins on this little bit cloudier day here in Southwest Florida, let's go ahead and get started with the June 2026 Cape Coral Real Estate Market Update video. I always start these videos out by showing you what the lowest and the highest sales were last month. So again, we're talking about May 2026. So let's start off with the lowest sales in a few different categories that we saw in the entire city last month. All right, so the lowest sales in the entire city of Cape Coral for the month of May 2026. We're going to look at a few different categories, and we'll start off with the lowest overall residential sale. And it's the lowest condo sale that we saw last month. As you can imagine, usually the lowest sale of the month is always a condo or a townhome or something like that. And this past month was no exception. The lowest condo that sold last month was this one right here, 4109 Southeast 19th Avenue, Unit 207. That's in a great location, actually, in the southeast section of Cape Coral, right off of Beach Parkway. It's right next to JC Park, if you know where that's at. They just recently redid JC Park, and it's absolutely beautiful down there right on the riverfront. But this condo was listed for a while. It was listed, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, just under 1,000 square feet of living area inside. This isn't a 55 and older community down there in the Rendezvous condo complex, but this thing was listed at $99,000 on the market for 193 days, and finally did sell for $90,000 with conventional financing. You know, this didn't look like too bad of a place. It was very, very dated, and I'm sure it was absolutely original to the 1982 build. It was built in 1982, second-story condo, so it's super dated. It's got the old popcorn ceilings that you love to see in those old 80s condos. But it did have some nice features in it. It's pretty clean overall inside. It did have an in-unit laundry facility, which is pretty nice for these smaller condos like that. Just looked to be pretty dated, and those 55 and older condos generally sell for a little bit less as well, but absolutely dynamite location down there. $90,000, that was the only one that sold under $100,000 this past month. Usually we see 2 or 3 sales for condos that get under that $100,000 mark, but this was the only one, and it sold for $90,000 right at the beginning of May. And that was the lowest condo sale that we saw last month for the entire city of Cape Coral. Congrats to the buyers and the sellers on that. Looks some updating to do in that unit, but overall $90,000. You can't beat that for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo in a great location. All right, let's jump over and see the lowest single-family home that sold this past month. And this time we're up in my neck of the woods. We're in the northwest section of Cape Coral, 1814 Northwest 20th Terrace. This property was listed for $149,000 and sold in 2 days for $126,000 cash, and boy, was there a lot of work that needed to be done on this one, as you can probably imagine. But this was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family home, just over 1,200 square feet inside, and it was built in 1990. But this was a wood frame home. You know, most of the homes that we have down here are concrete block walls. This happened to be a wood frame home, which is just maybe considered a little bit inferior construction method to those concrete block homes. And so it makes sense that this was the lowest sale. And this one, it definitely had, definitely beat up on the inside. Number one, it was on well and septic, so the central utilities, the central water and sewer haven't made it up to this area yet. So we see a little bit lesser sale values in those areas, as you can imagine. But not only that, this one needed a bunch of roof. It needed a new roof. Probably, you know, had some wood rot in the siding on the outside. Looks like there's some moisture stains inside as well. It even had some kind of boarded up walls. And in fact, they were asking for cash offers only on this one, which leads me to believe there was probably quite a bit going on there that maybe would have prevented somebody from getting traditional financing on this house. But this one was by far the lowest single-family home that sold last month. There was only a handful that got under $200,000, and this one was well under $200,000. But it just kind of proves my point. When these things get under $200,000, unless they're just, you know, completely burned out or something like that, they generally sell pretty quickly. And this one sold very quickly in just 2 days, and $126,000 was by far the lowest single-family home that we saw in the entire city last month. I'm going to do one more. Let's do the lowest Gulf access home sale. We're well known for Gulf access homes here in the city of Cape Coral. We've got well over 400 miles of canals here. Most of those are Gulf access canals. By Gulf access, I just mean you can have your boat behind your house and you can get out through the canals to the open Gulf. And the lowest sale this past month, as you can imagine, these are usually a little bit pricier types of real estate, but the lowest one last month was this one right here in the Southwest. This is a dynamite location too, 5305 Southwest 2nd Place. That's south of Cape Coral Parkway, right off of Pelican, and just a great direct Gulf access location. There's no bridges to get out from behind that house. You can have, you know, a sailboat. You can have a pretty big boat back behind there on that nice canal. And this one's listed at $395,000. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, just under 1,400 square feet of living area inside. Built in 1983, and actually the seller was the original owner of this house. So that seller had owned this property since 1963, and it was probably one of the only homes on that street when it was built in 1963. But nevertheless, it was on the market for a while, 143 days. They started out at $490,000, made 2 big giant reductions, finally got to $395,000. And you know, once these Gulf access homes, especially direct access like this, get under that $400,000 mark, they generally move pretty quickly. And this one did. Right after they reduced it, it ended up selling at $360,000 right in the middle of May. $360,000 cash, but it looked like it had largely original finishes inside. It had the old terrazzo floors, jalousie windows, did have a small dock, but no boat lift. But again, this was just a really dynamite Gulf access location. It was probably only 10 minutes out to the river with no bridges to go under. So definitely a really solid buy. It didn't have a pool, but that's kind of to be expected at this under $400,000 mark. So $360,000 cash was the lowest Gulf access home that we saw sell last month. And definitely congrats to the buyers and the sellers on that transaction. $360,000 cash was the lowest Gulf access home sale. All right, let's jump over to the fun ones. Let's look at the highest sales of this past month. The highest sales in the entire city of Cape Coral for the month of May 2026. All right, highest sales of last month for the entire city of Cape Coral for a few different categories. We're going to look at some similar categories. We'll start off with the highest condo that sold last month. You know, typically condos and Gulf access homes, we sell a lot more of them in the first 6 months of the year versus the second 6 months of the year, just because we've got the seasonal folks that are in town. A lot of those are shopping for this particular type of real estate. So we see a few more condo and Gulf access home sales in this time of the year, although we're wrapping up our main season going into the slower summer months. But the highest condo that sold last month was this one right here in Cape Harbor in the southwest section of Cape Coral, 5702 Cape Harbor Drive, Unit 204. You know, they got a couple of high-rise buildings there in that beautiful Cape Harbor community, but these are actually the mid-rise building just down a little bit down the street from the high-rises, and this one's right on the marina there, the Safe Harbor Marina there in Cape Coral on the waterfront. This thing was listed at $789,000. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,054 square feet of living area inside. These were built in 2004, so not terribly old as far as condos go, but this one was listed at $789. It sold in under a month, 22 days, and closed at $750,000 at the end of May, and that was conventionally financed. And this one's on the second floor. Looked to be pretty decently updated inside. Wasn't super updated, but had some nice features in there. Had all impact windows and doors. Had a big screen lanai, both in the front and the back. So the back was overlooking that beautiful marina and the community pool right there. But this one was sold turnkey furnished as well. So everything you're seeing in these photos came with the house. And $750,000 is pretty good for these units. You know, these mid-rise, they tend to be a little bit larger than some of the high-rise condos in there, so they typically sell a little bit higher amount, and this was a really nice one right there on the marina. And that was the highest condo sale of the entire month last month, $750,000. It's a little pricey to live in Cape Harbor. It's a beautiful community. They got great amenities in there, but these mid-rise condos especially, I mean, the monthly fees in there are almost $1,100 a month. And that's kind of a symptom of the broader things that we've seen in the condo market here recently. In the last few years, these condo fees have just jumped up tremendously in the last 3 or 4 years, and this one is no exception. But that didn't stop this person from picking this thing up at $750,000, and that was the highest condo sale in the city of Cape Coral last month. All right, before we get to the highest overall sale, let's look at the, you know, as you can imagine, every single month the highest sale is always pretty much always a Gulf access home. It's a home that's on a saltwater canal or on the river or something like that. They're just pricier types of real estate here in the city. So before we get to that one, let's look at the highest non-Gulf access home sale. And this past month, this was the highest non-Gulf access home sale that I've seen in quite a while. We got well up over $2 million. The highest non-Gulf access home was this one right here, 898 West Cape Estates Circle. That's in the Northwest Cape. It's in a beautiful, beautiful small gated community. It's actually right down the street from where I live here at the end of Tropicana in the extreme Northwest. And those homes in there, a lot of them are custom homes. There's a ton of them are Gulf access homes. There's a handful on the central lake in that community, and this is one of them. This was a 2023 built beautiful custom home. It was huge, 5,024 square feet, 4 bedrooms plus an office, 4.5 baths. Truly a custom, beautiful home that, you know, wasn't brand new. It was a few years ago, but it's just got some absolutely top-notch finishes, obviously, in there. But those lots in that West Cape Estates are all half-acre lots, so you can build these bigger properties like this 5,000 square foot plus home. But just a ton of just great features to this. It had a 3-car garage plus an RV garage. Just a huge, luxurious outdoor living space with a pool and a spa and an outdoor kitchen and a fireplace. Big coffered ceilings and custom trim work throughout this house. 90-degree sliders going out to the outdoor living spaces. You know, in the primary bedroom had a beautiful balcony overlooking that lake from the second story. Just a truly impressive custom home in a really amazing neighborhood. That probably West Cape Estates is probably one of the neighborhoods. If I had my pick of anywhere to live in the city, that would probably be at one of the top spots on my list, along with maybe Cape Harbor and Tarpon Point. Just a beautiful community, small. I think there's only 20 or 30 homes in this smaller gated community over there, but it's an absolutely stunning community, and this was a stunning house. So congrats to the buyers and the sellers. This was listed at $2.575 million. Sold in about a month and a half, just 47 days it took to sell this property at $2.346 million. And you know, that's the first one I think I've seen probably in a couple of years that it's gotten up over $2 million for a non-Gulf access home. This was on a waterfront, but it was just a kind of a smaller lake there in West Cape Estates, so it didn't have Gulf access like a lot of these other ones. And definitely congrats to the buyers and the sellers. That's a beautiful property, and it's good to see these non-Gulf access homes selling above $2 million. $2.346 million was the highest non-Gulf access home sale of the entire month of May for the entire city of Cape Coral. Let's do the fun one. Let's look at the highest overall sale. These are always Gulf access homes, and this past month was no exception. We'll get right into it. The highest sale for the month of May in the entire city was 1518 Hermitage Lane. This is in another really small, really exclusive gated community in the southwest section of Cape Coral. This is just basically one street that's absolutely lined with these huge, absolutely incredible high-end custom homes in there, and this was one of them. This was listed at $4.25 million. It's a 4-bedroom plus an office, 4.5 bath. Wasn't new by any means. It was built in 2001, but it was just under 5,500 square feet of living area inside. And that doesn't count that huge outdoor living space and the big, it had a big 1,100 square foot 4-car garage as well. But this one was fully updated on the inside, as you can imagine. Just really, really done well. It had a huge lounge overlooking the pool, elevator to the second floor, panoramic sliders in a lot of the bedrooms. The primary bedroom had some panoramic sliders looking out over the waterfront. This is essentially a riverfront home. I mean, the Gulf access to it, you're maybe 5 minutes out to open water. It's just right around the corner. So big water views out there. This had an absolutely stunning dock package on it. There was more than one boat lift. There was 2 different boat lifts, a big dock there overlooking that big wide canal and the Hermitage there. But the inside is just kind of what makes this property. I mean, they had a waterfront gym, a big movie theater, of course that big outdoor living space with the pool, spa, and the outdoor kitchen. But this was an absolutely incredible property. It did sell just in 79 days, again listed at $4.25. It was only on the market 79 days and sold for $4.2 million cash. So definitely congrats to the buyers. That was by far the largest sale or the highest sale that we saw this past month. But I'll tell you, for the end of our season right here, a lot of these higher end properties, again, transfer in the first 6 months of the year. I mean, we had 7 sales over $2 million last month in the city of Cape Coral, and there was another 4 that were in the $1,900,000s. So a lot of higher end properties transfer this past month. Really, this first 5 months of the year, we've had a lot of these, $1.5, $2 million plus sales that have occurred in the city, and it's good to see that. We're going to get into some of the volume numbers here in a little bit when we talk about some statistics, because a lot of these higher end homes have been selling this year compared to the last couple of years. But by all means, congrats to the buyers and the sellers and their agents, for that matter, on this incredible transfer there in the Hermitage in the Southwest Cape. $4.2 million cash was by far the highest sale that we saw last month for the entire city of Cape Coral, and that kind of wraps up the highest sales of the month. So let's start to dive into the statistics portion of this report. I always start out with just a broad, 1,000-foot view of the entire residential real estate market. We'll look at those stats real quick, and then we'll jump into these different categories. So let's start off with the entire market stats for the city of Cape Coral. All right, so we're starting out with the entire 1,000-foot view of the entire residential Cape Coral real estate market. We're going to look at the overall stats for the residential market, and then we'll dive into some of these different categories like off-water homes, Gulf access homes, condos, things like that. All right, so let's start off with the total number of sales in the entire city of Cape Coral for residential properties. So again, this isn't including vacant lots, not including commercial, not including multifamily. These are basically anything that was a single-family home, condo, townhome, things like that. So here's the graph going back to January 2024 for the monthly total number of sales. We had 527 residential sales last month in May. That's down a little bit from April's number. April we had 631, which was the high point so far for the year. But compared, the May number at 527 is a little bit low compared to the last couple of years. You go back to May 2025, and that number was 586. In May 2024, 619. But the broader story here is we've had a really tremendous first 5 months of the year, especially in certain categories. And we'll be talking about that here pretty quick. But if you look at the first 5 months of this year so far, we've sold 2,582 properties. You want to compare that to last year in 2025, the first 5 months we only sold 2,413. So we've sold 169 more properties this year than we did last year. If you want to look at that like demand in terms of the total number of sales that have occurred, we're up 7% based on where we were this time last year. So we've sold 7% more properties so far in the first 5 months of this year compared to 2025. And even if you go back to 2024, we sold 2,578. So we've sold a few more than we did in the first 5 months of 2024 as well, which is a really good sign. And like I said, we're going to get into some of the categories in a minute, especially Gulf access homes. They've been selling at a tremendously higher pace this year versus the last couple of years. So I can't wait to share that with you. But 527 total sales for the month of May for the entire city of Cape Coral. Let's take a look at the median price chart. So again, of those 527, you line them up from the cheapest to the most expensive. The median price is right in the center. Kind of gives you an idea of where we're at the mid-range of the market is at. But here's the graph for the median price chart, the monthly median price chart going back to January 2024. Median price last month jumped up to $370,000, and that's up from $367,000. Actually, the last few months we've kind of bumped up. As you can imagine, these median price figures kind of bounce up and down a little bit. We've got a pretty good sample size, so they kind of stay around the range that they're supposed to be, but we get a little outliers where it'll go up to 380, it'll come down to 350, things like that. So you kind of have to read between the lines, but just taking May 2026's figure of 370, you want to see what May of 2025 was like. The median price for May 2025 was $360,000. So we were $10,000 more in terms of median price this past month versus May of 2025. I don't necessarily think that means our prices are increasing, and we're going to look at some averages here in a second. But I think that's pretty good to point out. You know, the pricing overall, it's bounced up and down a little bit, but we haven't really seen a trend in one direction or the other for the last probably 8 or 9 months. The pricing has been tremendously flat, and I think part of that is, as we'll get into in a minute, some of the inventory reductions that we've seen. But pricing has been pretty fairly flat, and if you've watched these monthly market report videos for the last few months, you've heard me say, you know, it looks like this market cycle is pretty much flattening out at this point, and we're going to eventually turn that thing around and see some pricing increase. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen overnight, but it's definitely a good sign because we've been really in a descending market in terms of price for the last probably 3 or 4 years, and this particular market cycle appears to be flattening out and starting to head in the other direction. But let's, if you look back 2 years ago, May of 2024, the median price that month was $390,000. So we're $20,000 less than we were in May of 2024, which is a reduction of about 5.1%. But again, you're going to have to average these out a little bit to get a better feel of where we're at as an entire real estate market. So let's just take the averages of all the median prices in the first 5 months of this year and compare that to the first 5 months of last year and the first 5 months of 2024. If you take all the median prices so far this year for the first 5 months in 2026, that gets you to $362,800. If you do the same for the first 5 months of 2025, that number was $370,599. So we're just under $7,800 less in the first 5 months of this year versus the first 5 months of last year. So if that gives you a better understanding of what the actual correction has been in the last 12 months, and that works out to about 2.1%. So again, and a lot of that happened in the first 6 months of the year. The second 6 months on through today, pricing has been tremendously flat, even across the entire board. And there's some categories that have done better than others, as we'll get into in a minute. But I think it's pretty telling that, you know, prices have only softened essentially 2.1% since the first 5 months of last year compared to the first 5 months of this year. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I'm saying this particular market cycle appears to be bottoming out, and pricing will inevitably start to go back in the other direction, particularly when we're seeing things on the inventory front, which is what I'm going to cover next. So let's look at the total number of the total number of listings that were active on the market at some point during the month. The graph you're about to see shows you that number. So there's, for the month of May, you know, there are properties that went on the market, that sold, that came off, expired. But if you take anything that had an active status at some point during the month, that'll give you these numbers I'm about to give you. So here's the inventory chart going back to January 2024 for the monthly total number of actives that were on the market. Took a big drop from April to May. We had a total of 3,587 active listings on the market at some point last month. That's down from April's number of 3,829. But look how much inventory we've taken off the market since this time last year. If you go back to May of 2025, this inventory number was 4,539. We've taken a net number of properties off the market of 952. That represents a 21% reduction in inventory from this time last year. So well over a fifth of the properties have come off the market since this time last year. And even if you go back to 2024, when, you know, as many people weren't talking about there being an inventory issue, there was 4,228 properties on the market in May of 2024. So we're still down 641, or about 15.2%. from where we were 2 years ago, and that's only increasing. The trend has been in a downward direction. We always get a seasonal bump as we get into December and January, but the seasonal bump that we had this year, especially when you look at this graph, compare it to last year, you know, October, November, December, January of last year, we had this huge run up into those first few months of 2025. We didn't really see that this year. It bumped up a little bit, as it always does when we got into December and January. But we peaked out this year at February at 3,965. So we were still under 4,000 at the peak of this year, and we've come down quite a bit since then. We've come down about 9.5% just since February. The total high on this graph going back to 2024 was February of last year. There was 4,984 properties, almost 5,000 properties on the market. Compare that to now, 3,587. So we've taken a tremendous amount of inventory off the market, and this is just the overall stats, because there's some categories that have done better than others, and we're going to get into those now. So that's pretty much the story on the overall residential real estate market in the city of Cape Coral right now. Let's start to dive into some of these categories. Let's look at the biggest category that we have in the city of Cape Coral, and that's the non-waterfront single-family homes. We have a tremendous number of single-family homes here in the city of Cape Coral, as you may be aware, and most of those aren't on the water, so let's look at those properties. All right, so non-waterfront single-family homes. Again, this is by far the largest residential property category that we have here in the city of Cape Coral. We got a ton of single-family homes in the city, and most of them aren't on the water. So we'll keep a similar format here. Let's start off by the total number of monthly sales last month. Total number of monthly sales for non-waterfront single-family homes, 313, which is down from 359. That was in April. But again, here's the chart going back to January 2024. This kind of can bounce up and down quite a bit. These particular types of properties are a little more affected by mortgage rates and things like that. As you can imagine, these are generally a little bit less expensive category of property, especially compared to things like golf access. We see a lot of folks that are living here full-time buying these properties versus like golf access and condos, where we see a lot more seasonal folks. So this particular property category isn't quite as effective as those categories when it comes to big jumps in numbers of sales with the first 6 months of the year versus the second 6 months of the year. But nevertheless, let's just compare that to the last couple of years. In May, again, we sold 313 this past month in May 2026. May of 2025, we sold 356, so a fair amount more 12 months ago, and even more back in May of 2024. That was actually the high point on this chart, the 2-year high of 406 properties that month. But again, let's kind of try to consolidate this a little bit and look at the first 5 months of the year and compare it to the first 5 months of 2025 and 2024. The first 5 months of this year so far, we sold a total of 1,470 off-water single-family homes. In the first 5 months of 2025, we sold 1,500. So we're down very slightly, but we're still down. If you want to look at it like demand for this level of property is down by about 30 or about 2% from the numbers that we saw last year. And if you take it back 2 years ago, we sold quite a few more homes in the first 5 months of 2024. We had 1,623, and actually, as I recall, I think interest rates were even a little bit higher back during that time period as well. So lower interest rates, and yet we're selling a few fewer properties now than we were 2 years ago. In fact, we're down about 153 from what we set, from the pace that we set in the first 5 months of 2024. So that's a reduction of about 9.4%. So this is the main category that we're actually seeing a fewer number of sales this year compared to last year, last couple of years, really. Not entirely certain why that is. I think maybe the economy is just hurting folks a little bit more at these, the folks that are buying these lower dollar amount properties versus the higher amount. We've got sort of that K-shaped economy that you hear on TV all the time. And as a result, we're seeing a few more of the expensive sales, a few fewer sales in the lower price ranges. But 313, that's still not a bad month when it comes to total number of sales last month. We'll have to see how that continues as we get into the summer months, if we kind of try to maintain that and maybe catch up to last year's pace, or if it's going to continue to decrease. But I thought that was pretty interesting. But let's look at the median price for those sales. Again, 313 sales last month. The median price for those 313 sales was $340,000, exactly the same as it was in April. And take a look at this chart again, going back to January 2024. We've been remarkably flat. We've had a few months where we've kind of spiked up and down a little bit, but overall it's been remarkably flat for the last 9-10 months, really. Again, $340,000 two months in a row. If you take it back to May of 2025, that number was $338,880. So, we're up $1,120 from where we were this time last year. Again, I don't think that means we're in an increasing pricing pattern just yet, but it's pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty telling that we've been basically flat for the last 10, 12 months, really. If you go back 2 years ago, it's a little more apparent that we've corrected. You go back to May of 2024, and the median price for this category was $360. So we're down $20,000, or about 5.6% from where we were in May of 2024. But again, I think you have to kind of read between the lines and average some of these numbers out to get a better picture of what the actual market's looking like right now. And if you take the averages of these median prices for the first 5 months of this year so far, it averages out to about $335,000. You average out the median prices for the first 5 months of 2025, that number was $348,500. So that gives you a little bit clearer picture of kind of where the correction has been. We're down about $13,500 from the first 5 months of last year, and that represents a decrease in pricing of about 3.9%, just under 4%. And it's even more apparent you go back 2 years ago. I think that the price reductions that we've seen has massively slowed down and pretty much flattened out in the last 8-10 months. Because if you go back to the first 5 months of 2024, the average of those median prices was $371,900. So we're down almost $37,000, just under 10% from where we were in the first 5 months of 2024. So this category, again, I still think the pricing, I think there's evidence here that pricing has basically flattened out. We're going to have to get into the summer and see if these median price numbers continue to go down for any reason, but at the moment, everything is kind of flattened out. And even though we're selling a few fewer properties, not many, but few fewer than we were this time last year, the pricing has been very, very flat really for the last 12 or so months. And that's a good sign to see, especially if you're a seller in this Cape Coral real estate market. You want to see things kind of level off so this particular market cycle can kind of make a slow turnaround. But let's look at the inventory for this particular category of property. Again, inventory has been coming down since spring of last year. We had the seasonal bump as we always did, but the total number of active listings on the market in this category last month was 1977. We got under the 2,000 mark because that's down from April's number of 2,085. But again, look back 12 months ago to May of 2025 on this chart, it was 2,479, almost 2,500 properties, and now we're under 2,000. So we've come down 502 net properties, or about 20.3% in just the last 12 months. That represents, a pretty significant decline when it comes to inventory, even in this category. And even though we're selling a few fewer properties than we were last year, the inventory has come down tremendously. And even you go back 2 years ago to May of 2024, we had just under 2,400 properties on the market, 2,399. So we're still down 17.6%, or about 422 from where we were this time 2 years ago. The inventory for this year peaked out in March at 2,143, so we're still down 7.75% since the high point just a couple of months ago in March. So that seasonal bump, we got a little bit of a seasonal bump, but not really that much, especially compared to the last 2 years. And we've really already surpassed that and came back down just in the last two or 3 months. So it's good to see. I really think that we're going to continue to see a reduction in inventory as we get into the summer and the later years or later months of this year. And it'll be interesting to see if that has any effect on pricing. It'll have to have an effect eventually as long as demand remains fairly high. But that kind of wraps things up for the off-water single-family home market. Let's jump over to everybody's favorite category, and that's our waterfront Gulf access homes in Cape Coral. So let's take a look at the Gulf access home market. All right, Gulf access waterfront homes in the city of Cape Coral, Florida. I've got a ton of Gulf access clients. I sell a lot of Gulf access homes every year. It's one of my favorite categories. I really, really love working with the waterfront real estate that we have here. It's such an important part of our real estate market. Again, we've got over 400 miles of canals here in the city of Cape Coral, and most of those are saltwater Gulf access, boating access out to the Gulf. And so it's a very important part of our real estate market. It's very active in the first 6 months compared to the second 6 months of the year. As you can imagine, this is a category heavily favored by our seasonal residents. So they come down here for the winter and the spring. They go back up north to maybe their primary residence in the second half of the year. So we see a lot more sales in the first 6 months versus the second 6 months. But let's start off with the total number of sales last month. We've just had a really, really great first 5 months of the year when it comes to this category of property. Sold 99 Gulf access homes last month in the month of May. That's down a little bit from April. We sold 112 in April of this year. But you compare it to the last couple of years, and we're pretty much basically where we were in terms of the May's numbers. We had 103 sales last May, in May of 2025. That was the high point last year for that year. The high month was May of 2025 at 103. 2 years ago, May 2024, that was the high month for that year too, at 110. So I think you really need to take a look at the first 5 months of the year in total so far. And if you take a look at the first 5 months of the year so far, we've sold a total of 485 golf access homes. Compare that to the first 5 months of 2025. The first 5 months of 2025, we only sold 390. We've sold 95 more properties so far this year, golf access properties, than we did in the first 5 months of 2025. And if you want to look at that like demand, because these properties are getting snatched up at a faster pace this year compared to last year, we're up 24.4%. We've sold almost 25% more properties so far this year than we did in 2025. And even if you go back to 2024, which is a little bit better of a year, the first 5 months of 2024, we only sold 447. So we're still up 38, or about 8.5% from the demand level of 2024 in that season. So this has by far been the most active category that we have here in the city of Cape Coral. The golf access home market has just been really tremendously on fire this year so far, at least compared to the last few years. I mean, you're talking about almost a 25% increase in total sales this year compared to last year. And looking at that like demand, which I absolutely do, we just got a lot more golf access home buyers in the market now than we did in the last couple of years. So I think that's an exciting thing to see. And especially if you're a golf access home seller, that's the kind of numbers that you want to see. But let's look at the median price for that. As you can imagine, we're talking about not very big sample size. I mean, last month was one of the highest months so far this year, and we only had 99. Some months we'll only have 60 or 70. So our sample size tends to make our median price bounce around quite a bit. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that goes into the price of a particular golf access home. As you can imagine, we've got canals that are maybe 2 hours away from open water versus canals that are 2 minutes away from open water. That heavily differently affects the price. If you got the same property in both locations, the one that's 2 minutes away from open water is obviously going to be tremendously more expensive. So there's a lot that goes into these. So we've got sales ranging from that $4.2 million sale all the way down to that $360,000 sale that we saw earlier in this report. But let's look at the median price chart, and we'll kind of break this down. Total median price last month for those 99 golf access sales was $790,000. That's up from April's number of $757,500. But again, these bounce up quite a bit up and down, so you kind of have to look between the lines here a little bit. But let's just look at the May's numbers for the last couple of years. In May of 2025, last year, the median price was under $700. It was $690,000. If you go back to May of 2024, it was even higher. It was $811 in May of 2024. So that's why you say you kind of have to average the first 5 months of the year out to try to get a little bit better understanding of where the actual pricing is heading and has been. So I took the averages of the first 5 months of the year. The average median price for those 5 months was $747,300. The first 5 months of 2025, the average of those median prices was $731,900. So we're up $15,400. We're up 2.1% in terms of the pricing the first 5 months of this year compared to the first 5 months of last year. I'm not ready to call that trending in the upward direction just yet. If anything, I think it's been fairly flat for the last year. Pricing has been. But you can definitely tell that we've come down since 2024. The first 5 months of 2024, the average of those median prices was $810,200. So we're down $62,900, down about 7.8%. So we're down over 2 years, but we're actually up over the last 12 months, which is significant. And I think this category is leading the way in terms of this turn in this particular market cycle. Obviously, we're selling almost 25% more of these properties this year versus last year. You compare that to the non-waterfront single-family homes that we just looked at. We sold fewer of those this year, not by much, but a little bit. Fewer homes this year versus last year. Golf access were blowing last year out of the water in terms of the total number of sales. And I think pricing, if anything, it's been flat, and you could maybe make the case that it's gone up a little bit. And I think that just has to do with the inventory coming down a little bit. But before I move on, let me talk about the total volume in this category. So if we took the total dollar amounts spent on golf access properties for the first 5 months of the year so far, there's been a total of $435,119,549 spent on golf access homes so far in the first 5 months of this year. Compare that to last year. In 2025, we had spent in the first 5 months $343,383,690. So again, we've sold about 24.5%, 24.4% more golf access homes this year compared to last year, but we've spent $26.7 more on it this year in the first 5 months than we did last year. That tells me that the higher end of the market is moving a little better. There's a little bit more liquidity in that higher end of the market. So, take that for what it's worth. There's a lot more dollars being spent on golf access homes this year versus last year. Even more than it really should be if the pricing was totally equal. But I think that 2% comes from that extra 15,400 median price increase that we saw from 2025 to 2026. You get that, you tack that onto the edge of the 24.4% increase in overall number of sales, and that gets you to the 26.7% increase in total volume in terms of the total number of dollars spent on golf access homes this year versus last year. I just thought that was interesting. I'm not really sure what to read into that one just yet. I think we're going to have to get into the summer and see what the summer looks like for the golf access home market. If we really stay high, I think the golf access home prices are going to start to turn around, and we're going to see some increases before too long. But they're definitely leading the pack right now when it comes to these different categories of residential real estate in the market right now. But let's look at the inventory. So I think one of the cases can be made that the pricing has ticked up 2%. Or if anything remained flat over the last 12 months, is because the inventory's come down so much. So here's the total number of properties that were on the market last month. Here's the chart going back to January 2024. We only had 693 properties on the market in May of this year, golf access properties. That's down from April's number of 796. And that 693 is the low point on this chart. There hasn't been 693 properties on the market since October of 2023. The inventory for golf access homes is at its lowest it's been since October of 2023. Nobody was really talking about the market softening in October of 2023. The prices were still high. So I think that's remarkable that we've taken that much inventory off the market, because the high point since that time period was certainly last year. When you go back to May of last year, May of 2025, there were 970 golf access homes on the market. So we've taken 28.6% of the inventory off the market just in the last 12 months. We had 277 net fewer properties available now than we did back then. And even 2 years ago, the total inventory was 832. So we're still down 139 from 2 years ago, or about 16.7%. But when you really think about this inventory, peaked out the high point of this particular market cycle. It peaked out at 1,100 properties. There was 1,099 properties on the market in April of 2025. So from April of 2025 to today, we've essentially taken 35-40% of the homes off the market. That's a pretty significant number. The high point of this year was only at 800. So we've still come down 13.4% since February, which was the high point of this year. We always get that seasonal bump. We didn't get much of a seasonal bump, and now it's come down in excess of what we saw even back in the summer levels. So we're down lower now than we were last summer, which is pretty significant, and I only think that number is going to continue to decrease. So that's why I say, inventory is currently the lowest since October of 2023. Golf access homes are leading this particular market cycle in this turnaround, and inevitably we're going to see the golf access home prices go up first before we see any of these other ones go up. But that's the story with golf access homes. I'm just so impressed and so surprised. 6 months ago, I never would have predicted that these numbers would look like this for golf access homes. We've just had a tremendous year so far for golf access real estate in the city of Cape Coral, and I think it's a really, really great thing to see. So if you are a golf access home buyer, you got a little fewer choices now than you did this time last year. And you might want to act a little bit sooner than later, because inevitably this inventory is going to even come down further, and we're going to have fewer choices. And if demand remains high, then that competition is going to inevitably turn prices in the other direction sooner than later. You can make the case that they've come up 2% in the last year. I really think pricing has been flat for the last 12 months. So it's a matter of time. We're going to get 6 months into the prices increasing before we kind of feel confident enough to say, hey, we're in an increasing market. So by the time we realize it, pricing's already going to be heading up in the other direction. But that's the story of Gulf Access Homes. Just really impressed with those this year so far. So let's jump over to condos and townhomes, then we'll wrap up with the vacant residential lots, and then we'll talk about some advice for buyers and advice for sellers. Okay, condos and townhomes. I always lump condos and townhomes together. I'm talking about everything because we don't sell too many condos and townhomes in any given month, so we need to kind of include everything. So this is waterfront, non-waterfront. This is 55 and older condos. These are townhomes, attached villas, things like that. Everything kind of lumped together. Basically anything that's not a single family home and it's not obviously commercial or two sides of a duplex or something like that. So let's look at the total number of sales. As I previously mentioned, condos do a little bit better. We have a few more sales in the first 6 months of the year compared to the second 6 months, just because it's a very seasonal product. We have a lot of folks that are living here seasonally that prefer the condo market. So as such, we see a few more sales in the first and second quarter of the year as opposed to the third and fourth. But had 51 total condo and townhome sales last month in May 2026. That's down significantly from April's number of 71. Usually March, April, and May are the three biggest months that we have for condos. And we had a pretty darn strong March and April this year. Both of them were above 70. But if you compare that to the last couple of years, May of last year was the second highest month that we had for condos, and that was at 54. So we're not far off that mark, just 3 short of that. If you go back 2 years ago to May of 2024, there was only 43 condos that sold that particular month. So these numbers bounce up and down quite a bit. I don't necessarily read too much into the fact that we're selling 3 fewer condos this month compared to May of 2025. I think the broader numbers that you need to look at are the first 5 months of the year so far. That'll give you a better indication of what the pace is. And so far in the first 5 months of this year, we've sold 290 condos. The first 5 months of 2025, we only sold 237. So we've sold 53 more properties this year. And if you want to look at that like demand, which I absolutely do, the demand for condos and townhomes is up 22.4% this year compared to last year. And we're up from 2024 too. The first 5 months of 2024, we'd sold 253 condos. So we've sold 37 more than we did in the first 5 months of 2024. So that is an increase in demand of 24's number of 14.6%. So condos are doing pretty well too. Condos and Gulf Access Homes, both of which are seasonal products that we see a lot more sales in the first 6 months of the year. Both of those are doing fairly well this year, or considerably well this year compared to last year. So I think that's very interesting. The seasonal residents are down here in full force buying up properties, at least compared to what they were doing last year. But let's look at the median price, because condos had definitely corrected more than any other category in the market. The prices for condos peaked out in spring of 2023. They've come down tremendously since then. There's a few reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the HOA fees going up quite a bit. HOA fees have gone up considerably from 2024 to 2025 and to 2026. They've kind of leveled off. It seems like the condo fees from 25 to 26 have been relatively flat. There's always a little bit of increase almost every year, but we really saw the big jump really from 2024 to 2025 is where we saw that big jump as people were kind of digging themselves out from the late 2022 hurricane, and they were paying deductibles and refunding their reserves and things like that. But let's look at the median price. Again, we don't have a big sample size in any given month for these properties, so we kind of have to read between the lines, but the total median price for those 51 sales last month was $225,000. That's up from $215,000 in April. But again, you kind of have to read between the lines on these because they spike up and down quite a bit month to month. But let's just look at May of 2025 first. May of 2025, the median price was $235,000, $250,000. May of 2024 was $260,000. So we've kind of stair-stepped down the last 3 Mays. But I think you need to take the median price overall of the first 5 months to try to increase that sample size and get a better feel of where the market's actually at. Take some of these, variables down a little bit. And the total sales over the first 5 months of the year so far, the median price for those sales has been $213,750. First 5 months of 2025 was $235,000 even. So we are down $21,250 versus last year. That's a reduction in prices of 9%. And you go back 2 years ago to the first 5 months of 2024 and average all of those sales out in the first 5 months, that's 262,000. So we're down 48,250, or about 18.4%. Condos, this is what I'm telling you. Condos have corrected since that peak in 2023. They've corrected about 30%. And keep in mind, that doesn't even take into consideration, we've had a few years of high inflation. Generally real estate keeps up with inflation. It's usually a hedge against inflation. So when you tack on maybe another 10, 12% in inflation on top of that, the condo market's maybe corrected in reality, maybe closer to 40, 45% from the high point in 2023. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. And I think condos represent a tremendous opportunity right now, particularly for maybe young folks that can't afford to get into a single family home or something like that. They're renting right now, but maybe they can afford a condo. I would jump over there, get yourself a really great deal on a condo, even though the fees are maybe a little bit higher than they were a couple of years ago. Those fees generally cover a lot of things that you would have to pay anyway, like insurance, like water and sewer, like in some cases it covers, your cable and internet, things like that. So a lot of those fees pay for stuff that you would have to pay for otherwise. And I think it's a really attractive product, especially for maybe first-time home buyers. Maybe you're in your 20s or early 30s or something, and you're looking to get into this real estate market to participate in this inevitable upside that we will see in the near future of these prices going back up. Go get yourself a condo. Again, you can buy a condo now for under $100,000. You can buy a waterfront condo for under $200,000. So there's some opportunity in the condo market, particularly when you look at what prices were just only a few years ago, or we're down 30+%. But that's the median price chart. Let's look at the inventory, because one of the reasons that the median price has gone down so much is because we're stubbornly stuck at high inventory levels, even though we've done tremendously better now than we did this time last year. But here's the chart for the total number of active listings on the market going back to January 2024. We had a total of 431 condos and townhomes on the market last month. That's down from April's number of 473. But if you look at what we were in May of 2025, we're doing a little bit better. In May of 2025, we had 502 on the market, so we're down about 71, or about 14.1% just in the last 12 months. And 2 years ago, the inventory level was just about the same. In May of 2024, it was 501, so we're down 70 or 14% from May of 2024's level. This chart, this particular market cycle, the inventory for condos and townhomes peaked out in March of 2025 at 581. So, we've come down tremendously. This category, the inventory hasn't come down nearly as much as we've seen some of the other categories. Certainly the Gulf access inventory is rapidly decreased, well in advance of what the condo market has done. But even the off-water single-family homes, they've come down at a faster pace. The inventory's come down at a faster pace versus the condo market. So that's why we're maybe seeing prices lagging behind. Some of these other ones, they've kind of flattened off over the last 12 months. Condo prices have still come down about 9% from where we were last year. So the good news is we've still taken about 17% of the inventory off the market just since February. We had 519 on the market in February this year. So we've taken 17% off since then, and we'll continue to go down, especially this particular category. The inventory drastically reduces during the summertime. So as we get into the summer months, I'll fully expect this number to come down, and we'll probably see fresh lows in this category as well, and that'll inevitably cause pricing to kind of start to flatten out. But we've had a good year so far for condos. We've sold quite a few more this year. But the inventory remains stubbornly high, and as a result, we've seen a greater reduction in overall sale values for these things in the last 12 months compared to the other categories that have basically been flat for the last 12 months. So maybe there's a couple more points to go before condos kind of make a turnaround. I could easily see, another 2-3% coming off the prices until we flatten out and go the other direction. But condos will be bringing up the rear of this real estate market. Gulf access is leading. They'll be the first things that turn around. In fact, there's a case to be made that they already have turned around. Condos, the case to be made is it hasn't quite turned around yet, and we might see another 2-3% price reductions before it finally levels off and follows the rest of the market in the upward direction. But that's the story for condos and townhomes. Let's jump over to vacant lots, and then we'll get into some advice for buyers and sellers. Okay, vacant residential lots in the city of Cape Coral. I'm going to really focus on the non-waterfront vacant residential lots. So these numbers that you're about to see don't include the waterfront lots. I think those kind of screw the numbers up a little bit if I include those. And we just don't really see too many waterfront lot sales in any given month. So I think the broader story is told by just focusing on the non-waterfront residential lots here in the city of Cape Coral. But let's take a look at the total number of sales. Take a look at this chart and compare that to a lot of the other residential real estate charts that we looked at today. These are the total number of monthly sales. We had a pretty solid month this past month. In May, we sold 76 off-water residential lots in the city of Cape Coral. That's up from April's number of 63. But look at this kind of broader trend. We have this broader trend of decreasing demand for vacant residential lots. I think that entirely has to do with the fact that construction costs remain stubbornly high right now. And with the way the market has corrected on the resale side of things, it just doesn't make as much financial sense to go out there and build a new construction home when you can buy one that's basically a newer home, maybe 2 or 3 years old, for significantly less than it would cost to go ahead and buy a lot and then build on that. So we haven't seen as many of the lot sales in the last 24 or so months, 24, 36 months. But if you look at the first 5 months of the year so far, we sold a total of 286 off-water residential lots this year. Compare that to last year. In the first 5 months of 2025, we had sold 379 by this time. So we're down about 93, or about 24.5%. So the demand is down compared to last year, about 24.5% from what we saw last year. And if you go back 2 years ago to the first 5 months of 2024, we had sold 557 vacant residential lots in the first 5 months of that year. So we're down 271. Demand's down 48.7%. We're almost half the number of properties that we've sold this year versus the first 5 months of 2024. So I think that's significantly telling. But in spite of this really bleak-looking chart in terms of the demand, we really haven't seen much of an effect on pricing. So let's look at the median price for those figures. We had really a weird month for median prices for these residential lots. The median price spiked up last month for whatever reason. There was probably a few more sales of residential lots that were maybe south of Pine Island Road that were on Central Water and Sewer. A lot of those lot sales, they're closer to $90,000 or $100,000 in most cases. If you get up above Pine Island Road in areas where the central utilities haven't come in yet, those lot sales are generally closer to $40,000. So we may have just had a few more lot sales down south of Pine Island Road for those utility lots where they were selling at $90,000 or $100,000 that drug up our median price. But $53,500 was the median price for those lot sales last month. That's up from April's number of $42,500. But I think you kind of have to maybe just take that out and kind of look at these in a broader context, because you go back to May of 2025, the median price was $44,500. May of 2024, it was $48,500. But again, I think you got to take the median price over all of the sales in the first 5 months of the year to get a better idea of where we're at. In the first 5 months of this year, those total number of lot sales, the median for the first 5 months of the year came to 43,000 even. First 5 months of 2025, $45,000 even. So we're down just $2,000. It ends up being 4.44%. from where we were last year. So even though the demand has come down almost 25% since last year, the pricing really has been pretty negligible, just $2,000, and that really honestly could be a rounding error when we're only talking about $42,000, $43,000, $44,000 vacant lots that are selling. But if you look at the first 5 months of 2024, the median prices for all of those lot sales that first 5 months of 2024 was $45,500. So we're down about $2,500. Which again really isn't that much, especially when you compare it to something like condos where we've seen a 20+% correction. The 2-year correction for vacant residential lots has only come down about 5.5%. And again, when we're only talking about $2,500, a little bit of that could be a rounding error. I definitely think prices are less than what they were 2 years ago, but they're really not significantly less. There are fewer lot buyers in the market right now, but they're generally selling for right around where they were selling 2 years ago. And I think that's just a function of these lot sellers not being forced sellers. You don't have a bunch of people owning lots out there with a ton of carrying costs that need to get rid of their lot at all costs, and so you see those price reductions. We just really don't see that. It's taking longer to sell the average lot right now, but if you get it priced right, you can usually sell it fairly quickly. I think the last 4 lots that I sold in Cape Coral, sold every single one of them within a week of putting it on the market because we priced it right. So I think that's pretty interesting, but let's look at the inventory for vacant off-water residential lots. Here's the chart going back to January 2024. Kind of a weird chart. So the inventory's come down the last couple of months. We're down to 1,029 in May of this year. That's down from 1,080 in April. But you compare it the last couple of years, May of 2025, the total numbers of lots on the market back then was 982, so we're still up 47 or just under 5% from where we were this time last year. And that increase is even more magnified if you go back 2 years ago to May of 2024 when there was 895 lots on the market. So we've got 134, or about 15% more lots on the market now than we did 2 years ago. And you couple that with the fact that demand is down over 2 years, almost 49%. You're seeing a lot more of these lots just kind of sitting out there. And inevitably, we're probably seeing a few percentage points come off those prices. You can make the case that it's about 5% over the last 12 or 24 months. And we may have a little ways to go before things kind of turn around a little bit. But again, these lot sellers just generally aren't super motivated to move their properties, because if you're only paying a few $100s a year in taxes and you own a lot, you don't really have much of an incentive to reduce your price at all costs until you get it sold. So the lot sales that we are seeing are still generally around the same amount, maybe a couple $1,000s less than it was 12 months ago. And as a result, that's why we're not seeing the inventory come down, but it's also why we're not seeing the pricing really move too much. Just because, again, we don't have a lot of forced lot sellers out there. But that's the story for vacant residential lots, off-water lots here in the city of Cape Coral. Let's get into some advice for current buyers in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice for current sellers in a little bit better Cape Coral real estate market. I can't wait to share that with you. Let's get into it. Okay, if you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be thinking about and paying attention to as we get into the slower summer months of this year in 2026? Well, if you're a buyer in this real estate market, you've kind of been in the driver's seat for the last 2 or 3 years, especially last year when the inventory was out of control, crazy in spring of last year. You had your pick of the litter, so to speak. You had a lot of properties to choose from last year. There weren't as many buyers in the market depending on the category that you were looking in, and so you didn't have a lot of buying competition out there. So you were really in the driver's seat in spring of 2025. That's really not the case as much anymore, not nearly as much. When we're seeing these inventory levels drop down, in some cases like Gulf Access, the lowest this past month was the lowest we've seen since October of 2023. And you're noticing that fewer amount of properties on the market. I'm getting calls now where it's like, hey, we've been looking for Gulf Access homes. It just really feels like this market's been picked over. There's not a lot of really good properties left on the market. So people are starting to pick up on that, and the story is being told by those statistics with the median price ticking up 2% in the last 12 months, and the number of inventory coming down, at least for Gulf Access homes, the amount of inventory coming down significantly in the last 12 months. So if you are a buyer, it really depends on the category that you're in, but let's say you're a Gulf Access buyer, you probably need to get off the fence sooner than later and probably pull the trigger in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months if you want to try to catch this market at the bottom, because Gulf Access homes are definitely leading the way. You can make the case that prices have gone up 2% from last year for Gulf Access homes. I think if anything, it's remained relatively flat for the last year. But they've come down a considerable amount from the high point in 2022. So take that for a win. Even if you catch this on the upside, I think in the long run, you're still going to be in really good shape. There's still a ton of people moving to this area of the country. A ton of people specifically moving to Cape Coral. We're supposed to get another 100,000 full-time residents by 2040, which would increase our population by roughly a third. So still a tremendous amount of demand coming into this area. The real estate market's going to be fine for years to come. But in terms of the short term, if you're looking to get the best price for something, you probably need to be looking sooner than later, because for all intents and purposes, it looks like this particular market cycle is flattening out on the pricing side, and inventory is only reducing every single month. So fewer number of properties available every single month. That's going to continue for the foreseeable future, and that's only going to accelerate the rate at which prices start to go back up, particularly in cases like Gulf access homes and things like that, where we've seen almost 25% more properties sell this year versus last year. So the inventory is decreasing at a rapid rate. There are more properties selling, there's more buying competition, and fewer properties to choose from. Inevitably, that turns into increase in pricing. Some categories are looking a little better for you than others, like condos and townhomes. The inventory's come down quite a bit for condos and townhomes. The sale prices have gone down further than any other category in the property. So if you're shopping for a condo or a townhome, you're still in pretty good shape right now. And I could even see condo prices dipping down another 2 or 3% before they kind of bring up the rear of the pack in this real estate market. I think they'll be the last things to turn around, and right in the middle is the off-water single-family home market. Still plenty of inventory out there in all categories, at least compared to 2022 or 2023. So, but at the same time, this is the first time, the last 5 months, the first multiple offer situations that I've been involved in years, and I've been involved with maybe 4 or 5 of them just in the last few months with buyers and sellers. Hadn't seen those since really like 2023. So, the anecdotes are building up there that this particular market cycle is turning around, and inevitably our pricing will start to go up and will become a seller's market. Right now, I think it's still very much a buyer's market, depending on the property. But if you see something that's priced right, you got to jump on it pretty quickly, because inevitably there's a lot more people out there paying attention to what the market's doing and waiting for that right property to come on the market at the right price. And that's why we're seeing those multiple offer situations. So if you're a buyer, act sooner than later. And especially depending on the category like Gulf access homes, you're really going to try to make a move sooner than later on those things, because we're going to just see fewer on the market, and pricing is inevitably going to start to go back up. So if that describes you, no matter what category you're looking for, if you're looking for something in the next year or so, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. I always enjoy talking to the folks that watch these videos. I'd like to hear about your individual situation and what you're looking for, so I can help get you situated and pointed in the right direction to make the most out of what's left of this particular buyer's market. But that's my advice for buyers right now. You probably need to act sooner than later, especially depending on the category of property that you're looking in. This market cycle is making a turnaround right now as we speak. Okay, if you're a seller in the Cape Coral real estate market, or you will be a seller in the near future, what is my advice to you based on my 20 years as a full-time real estate broker here in Cape Coral? What do you need to be paying attention to? What do you need to be keeping an eye on? Well, you've waited for, your patience is being rewarded, because it's been very much a buyer's market for the last few years, essentially since 2022, when the pricing kind of peaked out, and it's been coming down ever since across all categories. But if you are a seller in this current Cape Coral real estate market, you're finally seeing inventory levels reduced drastically from what they were last year. It was a pretty bleak picture at this time last year in 2025. We had all-time high levels of inventory across a lot of different categories, and it's been absolutely remarkable. And even as much experience as I have in all kinds of different markets in this area, going back to 2006 when it was crazy, and then after 2008 when it was crazy in the other direction, and then every manner of thing in between there. I could never have guessed we have taken this much inventory off the market in the last 12 months, especially in categories like Gulf access. We've just seen tremendous number of properties come off the market, coupled with an increase in demand almost across the board in a lot of different categories, but especially Gulf access. Gulf access homes are definitely leading the market right now. We're at the lowest, in terms of inventory, we're at the lowest point we have been since October of 2023 for Gulf access homes. So if you're a Gulf access home seller, that's the kind of numbers that you want to see right now. It's still very, very important to price your property right. It's very important to get your property looking as good as you can, because there are more buyers out there and there are fewer properties to compete with right now, but you still got to be priced right, and you still got to have that thing looking tip top. If you do that, you will be rewarded, and sometimes with multiple offer situations. I've had a couple of properties here in the last 2 months or so sell for over list price because we priced it correctly, and we ended up getting more than one offer right out of the gate in the first few days. And then you let those buyers fight it out, and inevitably you end up getting more than you otherwise would have if you had priced it maybe a couple of percentage points higher out of the gate, and it took you 3 weeks to get an offer or something like that. So if you price your property right, you're still seeing a lot of success. But this particular market cycle is turning around. If you can afford to wait another 18 months, you may be in a little bit better position. I don't necessarily think that prices are going to skyrocket overnight, but we're seeing things flatten off at this point, and inevitably it's going to start ticking back up in the near future, at least in some, especially in some categories. I think condos are kind of lagging behind. The condos may have a couple percentage points to go down further in price before they turn around. But you look at Gulf Access, and the numbers say that we're up 2% from where we were this time last year. The prices are actually 2% higher this first 5 months of this year versus the first 5 months of last year. And that's the first we've seen of any kind of price increase. If anything, I think it's been pretty flat, but you can make the case that we've already started on the upward trajectory on pricing for Gulf Access homes. They're going to definitely lead the market. Condos are going to bring up the rear. But we're in the process of making this turn on this market cycle, and we're about to turn from a buyer's market into a seller's market. So as long as demand stays relatively high, which it has so far this year, and inventory levels continue to decrease, you're going to be in a better position the further we get into that type of market. So if you can afford to hang on for 12 or 18 months, that's great. If you need to sell now, you're still in a better position than you were last year, and you may, like I said, in some categories, you might even tick up a couple percentage points more this right now than you would have last year at this time. So give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email if you are a seller in this market. I'd like to hear about your individual property. I can tell you how we can best position that property to get priced right and looking as good as possible, so we can have some success in finishing this buyer's market out with some successful closings here as we get into the slower summer months. Inevitably, the number of sales always go down in the summertime. It slows down a little bit. We've kind of just come out of our main buying season, the first 6 months of the year, so second 6 months are usually a little slower. But it remains to be seen, and demand will probably stay a little bit high, at least comparatively to what it was in summer of last year. So there's light at that end of that. There's light at the end of that tunnel as a seller right now, and there really hasn't been until the last couple of months. And I'm just so shocked at how quickly we've turned things around in terms of the inventory and the pricing kind of flatten off, at least in some big categories here in the last 12 months. So if you're a seller, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. We'd love to hear about your individual property and tell you how I can help you out with that. Okay, so let me just summarize the current state of the Cape Coral real estate market, especially if you didn't wait through that entire hour of content that I just gave you. I know these are really dry videos and everything like that, so let me just give you the kind of 5-minute version right here of what we're looking at right now. The biggest story right now in the Cape Coral real estate market is just at how much inventory has come off the market since this time last year. We were hitting all-time highs in spring of 2025, and ever since then, in some cases, like Gulf Access homes, we're hitting the lowest inventory levels that we've seen since October of 2023. So a tremendous amount of inventory has been taken off the market, and as a result, we're seeing every sign imaginable that this particular market cycle is turning around right now. Pricing, at least across most categories, has been flat. If anything, you can make the case, especially Gulf Access homes, the numbers suggest that we're up 2% from where we were this time last year for Gulf Access properties in terms of prices. It's the opposite for condos. I think we still maybe have a couple percentage points to go before condos prices level out and start heading in the other direction. But we're basically here at the bottom of this particular market cycle, and some categories will start to do better than others. But nevertheless, we're going to probably see prices start to go up within 12 months. I don't necessarily think that the prices are going to skyrocket overnight, but if we continue to take more properties off the market, which it seems like we've been doing for the last 12 months, if that trend continues, and the other side of the trend is the number of sales are up significantly this year compared to last year. So if you want to look at that like demand is up, inventory's down, it's inevitable what's going to happen. The pricing as such has flattened out right now, and inevitably if those trends continue, we're going to see pricing start to head in the other direction. So if you've been a seller in this market, you've been very patient. You've had some pretty bleak news for the last few years as the buyers have been in control of this market. We're in the process right now of that power switching back over to sellers, and inevitably as we get more inventory off the market, the sellers will be more and more powerful in this market, and they'll start to take the reins especially if buying demand continues to be relatively high, which I assume that it will be. We're still, long term, this real estate market is still in really, really good shape. We're projected to have another 100,000 residents here in the city of Cape Coral by 2040. So all of that influx, I mean, look at what we're doing with property taxes right now. By the way, I released that video last week talking about what the governor has proposed. They've passed it in the House and Senate now. So it's going to be on the ballot in November. Taking property taxes away will be on our ballot in November. And if that gets passed by 60%, that's going to be reality in the state of Florida. And that's only going to help demand. There's only going to be more people coming down here. And that savings in terms of property taxes, at least for primary residents, is going to have to be priced out in the market one way or the other. And my assumption is it's going to price out in the way of increased sale values, increased market values for these properties. So if you're a buyer in this real estate market, act sooner than later, especially if they do get this property tax thing figured out. If you're moving down here for a primary residence, you need to have that property registered as a homestead before January 1st of next year. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait up to 5 years before you start seeing those property tax savings. So go back and watch that video if you haven't seen it. I just put it out last week. It kind of covers what they're planning on doing here, and it looks more and more like it's going to become a reality. I thought there would be a bigger fight in the House and Senate than there was, and they passed it right away. So it goes to the ballot now, and it seems like we have broad support for something like that. So there's a pretty good chance that that'll get passed in November, and we'll actually see significant property tax reductions, at least for primary residents in the state of Florida. But again, that's just only going to increase the demand. That's only going to turn this real estate market around faster. So if you're a buyer, you really need to act sooner than later. If you're planning on buying something the next 2 years, maybe look at getting something in the next 6 months, and then figuring out how to carry that. Either use it as a vacation rental, rent it out, do something. But you're probably going to be in better shape if you can act in that next 6 months versus waiting 2 years, when this market will have inevitably come back the other direction and our pricing will be in the increasing direction, barring some unforeseen huge macroeconomic thing like a recession or a stock market crash or something like that. That could turn things around probably overnight, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. If you are a seller, you're in a much better position right now than you were 12 months ago. I don't necessarily know how much better you're going to be in another 12 months. So the benefit of waiting another 12, 18 months might be pretty insignificant, but it will be there. And if inventory continues to come down, you'll be able to sell faster and maybe for a little bit more money here in 12 or 18 months versus right now. But we're selling properties quite a bit faster now than we were this time last year. I just got done mentioning that for the first time in probably 2 or 3 years, I've been involved in multiple offer situations, both with buyers and sellers. So the buying competition's out there. If you price your property right, getting a lot of activity on it. In fact, the last couple of Gulf Access listings I listed, we sold for over list price because we had multiple offers right in the first 2 or 3 days. So that's another anecdotal sign that this particular market cycle is rounding the corner, and we're going to be heading up in the other direction, becoming a seller's market in the very near term. But that's kind of the broad overview of the Cape Coral real estate market. I really hope you got something out of this video. If you did, do me a favor, hit the like button for me. It just helps me out, helps the channel out. And make sure you're subscribed, and make sure you turn those notifications on if you haven't already done so. I love the folks that watch this channel. Reach out, call, text, or email me anytime if I can help you with anything. Always enjoy hearing from the folks that watch these videos, and I hope you got something out of this. But appreciate you sticking around. I know these are longer, drier videos, but I appreciate your time, and hopefully you got a few bits of really good information and you have a better understanding of what's going on in the Cape Coral real estate market. But thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next video here in just a few days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.